the true story of my great-grandparents. And my great-grandmother was a Strega. And so the novel has two settings. It's set in Italy, in the village where my family's from. And it kind of shows the life before they immigrated to the United States. And then it's set also here in New Hampshire, where they moved to. And so the section I'm going to read to you takes place in New Hampshire after they've already immigrated. And when my great-grandmother, the character in the book is Eva, when she moved here, midwifery was being eliminated. So the scene here I'm going to read to you takes place in Marlborough, New Hampshire. And her husband and her sons are working in the granite quarries. And she meets the owner of the granite quarry, who's Mr. Wesson in this scene, because she delivers his daughter's baby. So his daughter's name is Laura, and she's in this scene. This is 1902 Marlborough, New Hampshire. Sometimes it is useful to have someone think you are a witch. Eva knew this was her only defense against a man like George T. Wesson in a place where she did not have full access to her powers. She knew she was to be his next victim. She could feel it in the way he looked at her, the way he squeezed her elbow too hard, the way he had begun to come to collect Laura from her house and stayed to chat with Eva, trying to act charming in a way that disgusted her to the core. She began to fashion her plan. "Seems my Laura has decided to become a doctor," he said one day as they all sat in the shade of her rickety front porch. Eva and Laura sat with Annie on the bench while Wesson leaned against the unstable railing across from them. And Annie is Eva's young daughter. Usually, Eva warned people off that railing. "You'll break your neck," she was known to say. But today, she didn't comment on the dangers of the porch railing. "What do you think of that?" "I think she'll make a wonderful doctor. I'd rather she be a midwife, but she tells me this is a bad idea," Eva said. "Yes, right now is a terrible time to be a midwife." Eva frowned. She was obsessed, making Laura cut articles out of their old newspapers and bring them to her. She forced Laura to read them to her. There were so many articles about the horrors of midwives, about the dangers they pose to society. But the worst ones, the ones that made Eva sit down and cry, were the day after day reports of midwives committing suicide, killing themselves after they had been accused of committing a crime, or after a court trial awaiting their sentence hearing. She guessed many of them had supplied abortifacients, something she herself had already done, or even performed an abortion, something Laura informed her had been made illegal here, along with herbs to control fertility. She began to stitch a doll. She began to be sure she was stitching the doll whenever Wesson came to pick up Laura, deliberately, as now, pulling the thread through the fabric slowly. The doll was another mystery she was forced to expose to protect herself. "Why is it," she asked him, "that this country is so unkind to midwives?" "Because this country is modern. It's all about being modern, and midwives are hopelessly old-fashioned. Medicine is a science after all, and women don't belong in science." "Yet your daughter wants to be a doctor." "We'll see if that happens, won't we? We haven't found a school willing to accept her. Besides, I wasn't telling you my personal opinion. You asked about America, not me, remember?" She stabbed her needle through the fabric. "Tell me what's modern about women giving birth." "Not that. The way they give birth. Perhaps they'll find a way to have it all be less messy, less painful, less horrible. It's quite unnatural the way it is now," he said. He leaned back. The porch railing wobbled. Eva did not flinch. "Messy, unnatural. This is a natural process. There's nothing more natural than this. I can think of one thing, he said, leaning toward her. You wish this to be less messy as well? Will they find a way to steal this from women too, she asked, facing down his lascivious stare. He dropped eye contact first. This subject bores me, he said, standing up straight. There was a blast in the quarry. Ah, the sound of money, he sang, smiling broadly, exposing the gold tooth at the back of his mouth. Eva shuddered. She tied 9 knots on a piece of yarn she would stitch into the doll, counting backward under her breath. What's that you're stitching? I thought you'd never ask, she whispered to herself. Then she said in English, a doll. For Annie? No, not for Annie. It's not quite that kind of a doll. I know of no other kind of doll. Well, you are not a witch, are you? He laughed and glanced apprehensively toward the fabric that did not yet have the shape of a doll.
So I have a question.
Okay.
And kind of coming from an Italian background, not kind of, I came from an Italian background also, and the word strega to me, or some strega, was meant witch, but this comes up so kind of reflects witch and midwife with the same functions, or a midwife got to be called a witch, and how it had the same kind of mishigash that's happened in this country and stuff like that, huh?
It is translated. It does mean witch, because it's really a wise woman. But yes, all the negative connotations for the word witch kind of made her not want to be called a witch.
Okay.
Another question for Theresa about her book?
I have a question, but you probably say buy the book to find my answer.
Well, we'll see. We'll see what she
Was she
says.
a witch or a midwife? Was she a witch or a midwife, and did she ever get accepted as such here in America?
Well, she definitely was what I would call a witch in the best meaning of the word. Yes, definitely. You know, she was a wise woman healer, and in most traditions, those were the midwives, and they would midwife birth and death. She was always called a midwife just because it seems like that's the more kind of safe term that you can use for her. But yeah, she's what you would think of when you think of witch. She was an herbalist, and she definitely was in touch with other dimensions.
And did she get to practice here?
So, well, what happened is the lineage got lost. No, I mean, the drama in the book is that she's losing her practice. It's becoming very dangerous for her to be a midwife in general, but also it just doesn't translate all the magic that came with it. And in the truth of my family, my grandmother didn't carry on the lineage because she didn't want to be different. She wanted to be American. So, yeah. But she finds a way in the book to kind of carry it on, even though it's diminished. I guess I could say that.
Has anybody in your family picked up, in modern times, picked up her craft?
Yeah, well, actually, I have. So, writing the book actually led me back to the lineage. So it was a very beautiful journey. Yeah.
Elsa?
Am I right from what I read that it's still midwives run into a lot of controversy even today, do they not?
Yeah, they do.
So
Yeah.
you have to be sort of courageous.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Another question for Theresa? Yes, one last question.
Hi, I'm just curious about the process of researching this book. How did you how did you find out about your great grandmother and so forth? What was that like?
Well, the whole time I was growing up, I was always told that she was a Strega, but I never knew what that meant. And because it hadn't been carried on, it wasn't passed to any of us. So it was kind of always just like you know, like a little bit of a folk tale within a family. I mean, your grandmother, great-grandmother was a Strega. She midwifed all the births in the Italian neighborhood. She was an herbalist. And it was always my aunt that would pull me aside and tell me this. And so finally, after the 2 books I wrote previous to this were about the goddess and priestesses. So finally, after I wrote those 2 books, it just finally dawned on me what she was trying to tell me, that there was this lineage actually in my family of a wise woman, you know, what you might even think were priestesses also. So I decided I wanted to know what that meant, and then I went and wrote the book. So it's based on actual stories from my family that I used as jumping off points, and then just, you know, just trying to find out what was written about immigrants, and then Strega and herbalism. I had to kind of really research so many different areas to piece it all together. Yeah, so it was a big project. It took me 8 years. What?
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.